Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the story of American drama. And let me tell you, it's a fascinating one. It's all about a nation trying and for a long time struggling to find its own unique voice for the stage. It's a story of false starts, of being overshadowed, and then, finally, this incredible explosion of creativity that put American life right in the spotlight. So let's just start with something that's kind of wild. Imagine picking up the definitive book on a country's literature and finding 0 plays in it. None. That poses a huge question, right? In a country just bursting with stories, why was the American stage so, well, quiet for so long? This empty space right here, this is our first big clue.
Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this, we need to understand the powerful forces that were swirling around in early America. You see, there were these 2 major cultural roadblocks that basically kept the curtain down on a truly American theater for, centuries.
On one side, you had this really deep-seated Puritan suspicion of the theater. For them, it wasn't just fun and games, it was morally dangerous. They saw it as a place that promoted sin, deception, and all sorts of corrupting feelings. And then, on the other side, you had the massive cultural shadow of Great Britain. For the longest time, American writers just copied what was popular in London, trying to write these big melodramas that just didn't quite fit their own world.
So you've got this cultural tug-of-war going on, and it created this long, slow search for something that felt genuinely American. This wasn't some overnight thing, no way. It was this gradual evolution that unfolded over more than 100 years, as a few pioneers started to chip away at those old British molds. And you can really see it happening step by step here. Back in 1787, Royal Tyler's play, The Contrast, was one of the very first to gently make fun of Americans who were trying way too hard to be English. A decade later, William Dunlap writes the first tragedy that's actually about an American subject. You fast forward a bit to the late 1800s, and guys like Bronson Howard are finally getting popular writing about American life. And by the early 1900s, people like Clyde Fitch and David Belasco are getting really experimental, making the whole look and feel of the theater more realistic. And then, boom, the 20th century hits and all that slow groundwork just erupts. American drama didn't just find its voice, it started to shout. This was the moment it really, truly came of age. And it was all thanks to this powerful new movement that completely changed the game.
And that movement was realism. Now, what's so revolutionary about realism is how simple the idea sounds. After all those years of over-the-top melodrama with big heroes and villains, the whole point of realism was just to show life on stage as it actually is, raw, unpolished, and real. Characters talk like people you know, and their problems were the everyday struggles we all face. This focus on truth became the perfect tool for playwrights to finally carve out a uniquely American voice.
Okay, so let's get into the 3 giants who basically defined this entire era, starting with the Titan himself, the Nobel laureate Eugene O'Neill. O'Neill's absolute genius was putting the lives of outsiders on stage, the outcasts, the broken dreamers, the people living on the fringes of society. He explored their struggles with a kind of raw, psychological truth that American theater had just never, ever seen before.
Right on his heels came Arthur Miller, and if O'Neill was focused on the individual's inner world, Miller put American society itself on trial. In a masterpiece like Death of a Salesman, he didn't just write a play, he put the entire American dream on the stand. He dug deep into the nation's obsession with success and showed the crushing weight it put on ordinary people.
And rounding out this incredible trio is Tennessee Williams. His plays, wow, they were poetic, they were passionate, and they were often just heartbreaking. Williams was not afraid to get into the messy stuff, He explored those deep, dark currents of American life, desire, memory, sex, and death, all the things simmering right below the surface of a society trying to figure itself out.
So together, these 3, O'Neill, Miller, and Williams, they literally built the foundation of modern American drama. But they weren't the only ones. A little later, the brilliant August Wilson would do for the African-American experience what they did for the mainstream, telling the story of a century in his incredible 10-play Pittsburgh cycle. The crucial point here, the thing to really get, is that they all took the American experience in all its messy, complex glory, and they made it the main event.
But hold on, the story doesn't stop there. Not even close. In fact, what happened next was just as important. The whole idea of a single American voice started to break apart, and in its place, we started to hear a much more complex, much more diverse, and way more representative chorus of voices.
So you start to see contemporary playwrights tackling these new, urgent issues. You get guys like David Mamet, who's famous for that sharp, rapid-fire, curse-filled dialogue, really digging into the moral rot in the worlds of business and sales. And then you have Tony Kushner, whose absolute epic of a play, Angels in America, dragged the AIDS crisis on a center stage and demanded a national conversation about gay rights and identity. And all this talk of new voices brings up another voice, one that had been brutally silenced for centuries. This quote from the Cherokee humorist Will Rogers, man, it just cuts right to the bone, doesn't it? It's a raw look at a violent history and the complete erasure of Native Americans from the national story. And words like his helped spark a change.
This was a long, hard fight. It started way back in the 1930s with pioneers like Lynn Riggs, who basically had to hide or code Native culture into his plays just to get them seen by mainstream audiences. Then, decades later, you have the Red Power activist movement in the 60s that sparked this huge demand for authentic stories told by Native people without compromise. That led to huge steps like the founding of the Native American Theater Ensemble in '72, a dedicated national platform. And that was followed by other incredible groups, like the feminist Spider-Woman Theater, which finally gave Native artists a stage to tell their own stories in their own way.
So, when you step back and look at the whole picture, from the dead silence of the Puritan era to today's stage, which is crowded with so many different voices, you realize something. The story of American drama is the story of America itself. It's this ongoing narrative that's always searching, always arguing, and always trying to redefine what it means to be American.
And that brings us to the final thought, the thing to really chew on. The script is still being written. The big idea to walk away with is this. The stage has always been a mirror, reflecting the country back at itself. And so the question of whose story gets told, whose struggles get seen, and whose voice gets to define the next act, well, that's just as urgent and important today as it ever was.